which are given by St. John are different from the way the Eucharistic adaptations of the scene are in the Synoptic Gospels. It's Jesus himself who distributes the bread and the fish, just like he did at the Last Supper. And he says, gather the fragments that are left over so that nothing may perish. And scholars say that reminds us of a very beautiful early church writing called the Didache, which speaks of the Eucharist. We give thanks to you, O Father, as the fragmented bread was scattered over the mountains, but was gathered up and became one. So perhaps there is that hint there of this. And then the miracle, which is the last in Galilee, arouses popular fervour and the danger of a popular uprising. Mark also has this as the last miracle in Galilee before Jesus goes south to Jerusalem. The crowd doesn't understand this sign. And of course that's a preparation for Jesus giving us a deeper teaching on what it all means. Now let's have a brief word about the walking on the water. In Mark and Matthew, the miracle of the loaves and fish is followed by the walking on the water, just as it is in here in John. In the Synoptics, it forms sort of a conclusion to the miracle. But in John, it's really a transition between the miracle and the discourse, which is going to follow. John's account of the miracle is very short and is told from the disciples' perspective. They are waiting for Jesus. It would seem that John treats the scene primarily as a divine epiphany. The centre of this is ego eimi. It is I. It is I. Remember what Jesus said to the Samaritan woman? It's he, it's I, Messiah, the one who is speaking to you. I am he. Here Jesus says to the terrified disciples, it is I, don't be afraid. And it's almost as though we're watching God walking on the waters of chaos, subduing everything and telling us not to fear. The Passover song, or Haggadah, is a liturgical narrative which is recited at the Passover meal or sung at the Passover meal. And it closely associates the crossing of the sea, the Red Sea, and the gift of manna. In Psalm 77 we read, your way was in the sea, your path was on the many waters, yet your footsteps could not be seen. And in Psalm 107 we have that beautiful psalm, magnificent psalm. We have people wandering in the desert, and the Lord fills them with good things. And then in another section of this psalm, some go to the sea in ships, and the Lord raises the stormy winds, and they cry to the Lord, and he delivers them, bringing them safely to the harbour. So in the Psalms, which are the prayer book of the Jewish people, there are passages which we think of as we watch what St. John has written and listen to what St. John has written. Now we go to the discourse itself on Jesus as bread of life, which is over 50 verses, or around 50 verses in this whole chapter. So a huge discourse. First off, the first number of verses are sort of like a preface or an introduction to the homily, to the discourse. We are now at Capernaum, or Capernaum. Capharnaum, the village of Nahum. The identification of the village with the Old Testament prophet Nahum is very uncertain, but very popular for the medieval times. It was a poor village. We know this because a Gentile had to build the synagogue. Jesus chose this village to settle down in. And in Scripture, it is referred to as his own city. He probably chose it because his first disciples, Peter and Andrew, lived there. He may even have stayed with them. Our wonderful pilgrim from Bordeaux again says, "In Capernaum, the house of the Prince of the Apostles has been made into a church. There's also a synagogue where the Lord cured a man possessed by the devil." And still today, it's to Peter's house and to the synagogue that we go on pilgrimage when we go to Capernaum. The Franciscans purchased the ruins of this place in 1894. And before and after the First World War, they did their excavations and they resumed them again in 1968. The synagogue that we have today dates from the 4th century, we think. But it's built on some black basalt stones. And they go right back to that very 1st century synagogue into which the Lord himself stepped. And it's in that synagogue that he preached, more than likely, a homily on the bread of life, making this synagogue, of course, the most famous synagogue in the whole of the Galilee. Now, Father Frank Maloney sees this as he calls it a homiletic midrash, which has nothing to do with eczema or anything like that, but it's a homily and it's based on the text, but hovers around it and uses other texts and so on. But so it is a homily based on this text. On the text which is given to him, to Jesus, to read, to talk about, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. Verse 31. That seems to be the text. Now, Father Frank Maloney says, within this now there are 5 interventions from the Jewish people, and he sees therefore 5 sort of divisions within this homily. The first one is the preface itself, verses 25 to 29. "Rabbi, when did you come here?" And that leads Jesus into instructing the crowd on the need to search for food that lasts forever. The second intervention, "What sign do you do?" Verses 30 to 33, the second part. They want something better than manna coming from Moses. And Jesus points, therefore, to the bread that lasts forever from heaven. The third question the Jewish people ask is, or it's not a question, it's an intervention, "Lord, give us this bread always." Verses 34 to 40. And now Jesus is presenting himself as the true bread, the living bread. The fourth intervention, "Isn't this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How does he say, 'I've come down from heaven'?" Verses 41 to 51. And Jesus then discusses his origins. And the final part is, "How can this man give us his flesh to eat?" Verses 51, 52 to 59. And this is perhaps a duplicate of the sermon 35 to 50. And this is where Jesus insists that people need to eat his flesh and drink his blood. So the preface then, the first few verses of this, verses 25 to 29 of chapter 6,